Jewish Cooking Connection, sponsored by the Cultural Arts Program of the Jewish Federation of the Greater San Gabriel and Pomona Valleys. My name is Lori McKenna and welcome to my kitchen. Today we're going to be cooking cheesecake. I like to call this cheesecake a la Joanne because this is my mom's recipe for cheesecake and her name is Joanne. This is a perfect recipe to cook for Shavuot because traditionally we eat dairy on Shavuot. It's also just an excellent cheesecake recipe anytime you're in the mood for cheesecake. So let's get started. There are three components to this particular cheesecake. There's the crust. So you're going to need 16 graham crackers. There's some question as to whether this constitutes a graham cracker or this constitutes a graham cracker. You'll see in some recipes this referred to as a graham cracker sheet. Well, since my mom didn't specify and I played around with the recipe a little bit, I used 16 of the graham cracker sheets. So we need that and a half cup or 1 cube of melted butter. I use unsalted butter. I always use unsalted butter in baking. Then comes the delicious part. This is the filling. So the filling is 12 ounces of cream cheese, best to soften it till it gets to room temperature. You're going to need 2 eggs that are separated, a teaspoon of vanilla, and 3/4 of a cup of sugar. Now, for baking, I prefer using baker's sugar. What is baker's sugar, you may ask? Well, baker's sugar is just like regular granulated sugar, except it's an ultra-fine consistency. It measures exactly the same way, it tastes exactly the same, but because it's ultra-fine, it incorporates into the recipe much better. So you don't get like those little chunks of sugar that you sometimes get if you use a regular ground sugar. The last part is the topping, which makes this an ultra-rich type of cheesecake. So for the topping, there's 2 cups of sour cream, 5 tablespoons of sugar, the baker's sugar, and another teaspoon of vanilla. So let's get started with the first component of this, our crust. So obviously, you need to go ahead and crush your graham crackers because you can't make a crust with whole graham crackers. So the way I do it, a little bit old school, you can always put them in the food processor, but what I prefer to do is to put them in a nice Ziploc bag. I've already pre-done this. And take a rolling pin and roll your graham crackers. So it makes it easy. You can see the consistency that you have of the graham crackers, and it's neat. You don't get graham crackers all over the place, and you also don't have to dirty a food processor just for one element of this. So we pour our graham cracker crumbs into the pie plate, and then we add our melted butter. And it's important when you add the butter just to make sure that I use a fork and swirl the butter around to make sure that all the graham crackers get moist with the butter, because this is what creates that delicious, wonderful crust. I remember my mom making this cheesecake several times when I was a young girl. My mom was quite a gourmet cook. My dad is a cook, obviously. You have seen my tabbouleh recipe from him. But my mom was the one who would cook things like beef Wellington and crepe Suzette and all these very fancy, yummy dishes. This is one of her more basic desserts, but it is just quite good. Now, remember I told you about the 16 pieces of graham cracker, the 16 graham crackers? Well, I think that might be a little bit too much, but if you use just the graham cracker squares, that's not going to be enough. So what I do is, after the graham crackers are moistened, you pat the graham cracker crust out into the pie pan. You want to make sure that the crust evenly covers the bottom and the sides, but you don't want to have too much. You don't want to have like one part that's like 3 inches of crust and another part that's thin. So I play with it a little bit. It looks like I'm going to have too many graham crackers, so I just take out what seems to be too much and just keep playing with it as I pat it down. A little non-scientific, but you know, it works. And I neglected to say that the recipe calls for a 9-inch pan. This is a 9.5-inch pan, and I already have my oven cooked, set to 350. So you're going to put this crust in a preheated oven, 350, and bake it for 3 minutes. So as you can see by the magic of editing, my crust is done. It's taken out of the oven, and while it was baking for 3 minutes, only 3 minutes this time, I had the opportunity to clean up and get set up to make the filling. So let's get started. I took my 12 ounces of softened cream cheese, and now I'm going to cream it together with the 3/4 cup of sugar. And even though it's softened, it can still be a little hard. So it really doesn't matter the sequence of adding the ingredients. You know, I've got my sugar, I've got a teaspoon of vanilla, and adding the vanilla to the cream cheese really helps the creaming part of it. I just like to start with the cream cheese and the sugar. And then you add your 2 egg yolks. And as sometimes happens, the yolks just want to get caught in the bowl. Another trick of baking that I found out is that you can let the eggs come to room temperature. It's actually better if the eggs can come to room temperature as well. So our filling is not quite done yet. Because I need another clean pair of beaters for this part, we had to stop for a second so I could clean them up, and now we're back. So the 2 egg whites, you're going to put in a separate bowl, which is why I needed to clean my beaters. Now you're going to whip these egg whites until they're stiff but not dry. Okay, so they're just about to the point of being whipped without being dry. So, as I had started to say, this cheesecake is great by itself, or if you like, you can serve it with a little raspberry coulis, or you can top it with some beautiful strawberries or any kind of fruit. So at this point, you want to fold the egg whites into the filling, which is tricky. You have to remember to fold it and not stir it, because you want to keep whatever air you have in the egg whites. You want to maintain that consistency as you incorporate it into the filling. Just about right. So I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to grab my crust, which has cooled. And take my handy dandy spatula and put my filling into the pie pan. This really is an easy recipe. There's just a few steps to it. So want to make sure you get every little spatula full of the deliciousness. Okay. And then just take your spatula and very gently, because again, you don't want to, deflate your egg whites. very gently spoon it around and evenly distribute over the pie crust. And then this is going to go into your 350-degree oven for 25 minutes. And as you can see, 25 minutes has elapsed and our cheesecake is out of the oven. We have to wait until it cools well, but in the meantime, we can put together our topping. This is 2 cups of sour cream, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and then 5 tablespoons of sugar. And again, I use the baker's sugar. Put it together and mix it well. As you can tell, my beaters get a good workout when I make this cheesecake. There we go. Didn't take too long at all. Primarily because I use the baker's sugar, which again is just perfect for baking. All right, so once that is incorporated and it's beaten well, we just take our handy dandy spatula and again, we pour this topping over the cheesecake. And take our spatula and just spread all over the top. Make sure that all of the filling is covered with our topping. And then we put it back in the oven for 5 minutes. And again, it's still at 350. Well, it's been 5 minutes and my cheesecake is now done. The only thing I have to do now is wait for it to cool completely and then put it in the refrigerator. It really should be refrigerated about at least 3 to 4 hours before it's eaten. And of course, kept in the refrigerator after you cut into it, assuming there's anything left. So, bon appetit and enjoy.
כל המעשים ברוך ומבורך בפי כל נשמה גדלו וטובו מלא עולם דעת ותבונה סובבים אותו המתגאה על חיות הקודש ונדע בכבוד על המרכבה זכות ומשור לפני חיסו חסד ורחמים לפני כבודו טובים מאורות שברא אלוהינו יצרם בדעת בבינה ובהשכל